shoot 'em ups are a strangely unpopular genre. They were the most popular video game genre before platformers came along, and such a simple concept that anyone can get a grasp on. But weirdly, even amongst certain niche gaming circles, the genre isn't popular. You'd think because of its nature it would have a lot more crossover with more well-known niche circles like anime, fighting game, and JRPG fans, but it doesn't even have that. But these are mostly games that can really be enjoyed by anyone however you like. I'm not really a hardcore player trying to go for no death runs or high scores, but I'm still a big fan of the genre. And as one, I think it sucks that a lot of people lack an interest in it, and I've been thinking about talking about some games that are a good place to start to get others at the very least interested in the genre, because there are tons to choose from, and what better place to start than the PC Engine, or TurboGrafx 16 as it was known as outside of Japan. The PC Engine is pretty much the shoot 'em up platform. Shoot 'em ups are central to the PC Engine's identity in a way that they are for no other system, and over 1/6 of the library consists of shoot 'em ups. It's known for loads of notable shoot 'em ups like Blazing Lasers, Soldier Blade, and What Your Mother Takes Every Night, but I don't want to talk about those games today. I want to talk about a personal favorite of mine that's a little flawed, but it's such a charming game in almost every aspect I can't help but recommend it. That, of course, being Ginga Fukei Densetsu Sapphire, or Galaxy Policewoman Legend Sapphire, a game probably best known as Mike Matei's rarest game.
Okay, alright, well, Inspector Gadget's gonna do the review.
Ginga Fukei Densetsu Sapphire.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike Matei.
I know, I probably butchered that, but sorry.
Naturally, as a game that probably crossed most normal people's radars from a 4-minute video on YouTube, people who haven't played it yet don't really know a whole lot about it and haven't been given much of a reason to care. Well, I want to change that because I love this game and I think it's a great beginner recommendation as far as shoot 'em ups go. And even if you don't end up playing it after watching this, and honestly, I can't blame you because the game itself has so many barriers to entry that make it basically impossible or too much of a hassle for any regular person to play. Even if you're playing by, let's just say, any means necessary, I still hope you find it interesting. Now, before we get into the game itself, let's talk about its development by first taking things back to 1995. The previous year, NEC and Hudson Soft had released the arcade card expansions for the PC Engine CD-ROM systems. I'm not going to try to explain it here. The PC Engine had a lot of add-ons and expansions, but basically, this added a large amount of RAM to the system, allowing the 8-bit system from 1987 to produce games that pretty much look up to date with a lot of the current arcade games of the time. There weren't a lot of games that required it though, but it was mainly created to keep up with the fighting game trend of the time. But Hudson Soft, who, if you didn't know, were the co-creators of the PC Engine, wanted one last arcade card game to show off its capabilities, specifically a shoot 'em up, which the arcade card library weirdly lacked beforehand, and one that could serve as the last hurrah to the legacy the shoot 'em up genre had left on the console. Though the last shoot 'em up on the system would actually end up being Steam Hearts, released in 1996, a game that I'm not covering. If you know, you know. With this wish in mind, they went to CA Production, a recently formed studio with whom they had previously worked with on Hagane and a game based on the manga Kishin Doji Zenki for the Super Famicom, and would actually later work with on most of the Mario Party games, and CA Production has continued to work on them even after Hudson quit making them. CA Production was founded by people who had previously worked at Red Company, probably best known for creating stuff like Sakura Wars, Bonk, and Tempo on Gate of Thunder, and its follow-up Winds of Thunder or Lords of Thunder for the PC Engine. And before that, they worked at Technosoft on games like Visual Clarity as a Foreign Concept Force 3. CA Production initially planned on creating a sequel to the Thunder games, but Hudson began meddling, and this is when the project became the weird amalgamation of things it is today. Hudson's Bishoujo adventure game series, Galaxy Fraulein Yuna, probably best known in the West for its OVAs, because of course it is, was doing incredibly well. So they brought on that series' creator and artist, Mika Akitaka, who's probably best known for working on the Gundam franchise, to work on the game. Akitaka was delighted by the offer and helped design the game along with its lead characters. I theorized that another reason that they did this was because during this era dominated by fighting games, the best way for shoot-'em-ups to compete was to have strong character designs. As far as I know though, and I don't know much about this franchise, the game has no connection to Yuna other than sharing the artist and being titled similarly. They also got prolific music group T's Music, whom Hudson had previously worked with on other PC Engine games, including the Thunder games, to supply the game with its rockin' soundtrack. So the game ended up becoming this weird amalgamation of things. A super impressive showcase for the system with loads of unique 3D graphics, a hardcore rocking soundtrack, and a game for fans of cute anime girls. I gotta say, one of the rules of old school shoot-'em-ups is that if it stars an anime girl, it's 99% likely that the game is an absolute banger. I say old school because literally every shoot-'em-up release these days does star an anime girl. But yeah, the game has a lot of different things going for it for different demographics. As Mr. IGN once said,
"It has a little something for everyone."
Meanwhile, seemingly after adding Akitaka to the team, the game also shifted away from the horizontal style of the Thunder games to a specific vertical style that had been pioneered in 1989 by Compile and Hudson's Gunhead, or Blazing Lasers, for the PC Engine, and later perfected by other games on the platform, primarily in Hudson's Star Soldier series. Side note though, it would have been cool if this game included a bonus caravan score attack mode like those games. So basically, it was the ultimate culmination of the beloved PC Engine style of shoot-'em-up, and it was a game that had loads of appeal for all different kinds of audiences. Sounds like a recipe for success. Critically, yes. Commercially? Well, let's see. It's a shoot-'em-up released over 4.5 years after Street Fighter II exclusively in Japan for a system that came out to compete with a console made in 1983, while the PlayStation and Sega Saturn are the hot new things that requires you to have a card add-on for an add-on to that system, or a certain variation of it, and you better hope you have the correct version of the arcade card for the correct version of the CD system, or else you'll see this screen telling you to insert the correct one and realize you wasted your money. Yeah, do I even need to tell you how this game performed commercially? As such, it's now one of the rarest and most sought after PC Engine games, and that's what I find most fascinating about this game. It's the most inaccessible, accessible game. I'm not just joking when I say the game has a little something for everyone, because it's a pretty welcoming game that's aiming for the widest audience possible for a game like this in theory. Yet in practice, its actual audience is barely anyone. I find it so weird how they actually tried to aim for a bigger audience here, banking off of the involvement of the creator of more popular series and designing the game in a way that makes it easily the most accessible of the soldier-style shoot-'em-ups, which the previous 3 PC Engine Star Soldier games were already some of the more accessible shoot-'em-ups out there. They could have easily have gave in, realizing that this game was doomed to commercial failure, and just aimed to make the biggest challenge for the most hardcore demographic, but they actually tried to gain a wide audience. A fascinating decision to say the least, and honestly, I don't even think that they did a bad job of that, in theory. Anyways, Ginga Fukei Densetsu Sapphire released on November 24th, 1995, the same day as games like Toshinden S and Virtua Cop for the Saturn, and of course, the best of all, Leading Jockey 2 for the Super Famicom. Hudson also released another game that day for the Super Famicom, ironically a sort of follow-up to CA Productions' previous game, another game based on the manga Kishin Doji Zenki. But finally, it's time to get into the game itself, starting with the most important part of any shoot 'em up, the story. Okay, quit laughing. Some shoot 'em ups genuinely have good stories, but this one, not so much. But it skirts by any genuine criticism by being charming enough. It at least has an intriguing concept, taking place in 2092, where time travel has been discovered and is beginning to become normalized despite being quickly banned, and a time criminal is on the loose wreaking havoc. So a group of anime girl time cops, the titular Ginga Fukei, or Burning Rabbits, must put a stop to it in their cool spaceships. As cool of a concept as it is, I've always felt time cops have never made sense. Like, you can just go back in time and prevent the time cops from existing. Time travel is too OP. It's clear though, once you start playing the game, that this plot is just an excuse to get away with not having a consistent theme throughout the game's stages. You know, you could apply this same excuse to a lot of shoot 'em ups that are designed like that. Actually, Hudson used this exact same excuse for the plot of the game Final Soldier. I will say though, something that I didn't mention when talking about this game's development is that it was very rushed, and this is a very obvious sign of that. In fact, the game's really weird mix of identities, even though I think they surprisingly don't really clash that much, is also a sign of that. I mean, the characters never appear during the gameplay. The anime girl stuff and graphical showcase stuff are oddly separated from one another, and I do admittedly wish they could have mixed them together. It's clear that they didn't really have a real cohesive idea tying all of the levels together during early development, and were just designing whatever looked cool, and just came up with this excuse plot at the last second. It's not an excuse plot because they didn't care. They straight up didn't have time to care. That being said, I think the game is still great in spite of being rushed, and them cutting corners honestly made for a tighter experience that doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a pretty polished game in spite of this as well. I also definitely feel if they had been given more time, they would have either have leaned further into either the impressive visuals or the characters, de-emphasizing or outright doing away with the other half of the game's identity, which definitely would have made it less unique and charming. It's actually a very similar situation to what happened to Hudson's previous game in this style, Soldier Blade. It was also a rushed game originally meant to be something different during its development. A lot of corners were cut, which actually kind of benefited the game. And like I've been saying, the gameplay is very similar between the two. But I might have to get into that some other time, because I'd love to talk more about it. That wasn't a promise though. Anyways, why don't we get into those characters I've been going on about? The game stars 4 time cops, blue, pink, green, and purple. Okay, I'll get into their actual names, but they're admittedly pretty generic archetypes you've already seen before, and as much as I've loved this game for a while, I still struggle to commit the characters' names to memory. One name I can remember is the titular Sapphire White. She's basically the main one. Why? I don't know, she's blue. I guess she's the main character because she's the design the developers like the most, and they really emphasize that she's the main character regardless of who you play as. In terms of gameplay, the difference between these characters is pretty negligible. Their weapons are slightly different, but the more noticeable difference is their speed. Sapphire's ship, the Wild Bird, is in the middle when it comes to speed. The pink character is Charlotte Siphon, the youngest of the group, being 16 years old. Yeah, I guess it's not that much of a problem though when you consider how much time travel trivializes everything. Like, if she dies, she could just be revived through the power of time travel. She fits the basic youthful archetype, being very cheerful but easily frightened. She's actually my preferred character to play as her ship, the Peregrine, is the fastest, though admittedly it kind of has the worst weapons, but you won't really notice. The green one is Helena Evangeline, the oldest of the group and also the slowest. Wait a minute, so according to this game, the younger and shorter you are, the faster your spaceship is, and vice versa. As you can imagine, she's pretty much the level-headed mom of the group. She's the one I enjoy playing the least because of how slow her ship, the Neo Kite, is, but it's not that bad, and it probably has the best weapons in the game. Once again though, you can't really tell. The purple one is Jasmine Willong. I think her ship, the Ibis, is a bit slower than Sapphire's, but I can't tell. She's the no-nonsense, hot-blooded one. I don't know, she kind of feels like an afterthought. Sorry to all of the Jasmine fans out there. I only recorded full playthroughs of both Sapphire and the pink one. See, I already forgot. Charlotte. But yeah, that's our cast. Now let's actually get into the Sapphire journey. The game starts with this super cool anime opening that's half explaining the plot and half pretty much just an anime series opening. We then get our title screen and graphics. This might not look impressive, but I need to remind you, this was initially the best graphics the system could do on its own. If I didn't tell you this was a PC Engine game, you could have easily have mistaken it for a Saturn or PS1 game. At the very least, it doesn't look out of place if I tell you it's from 1995. And none of this is actually polygons, these are all pre-rendered graphics. The arcade card's RAM expansion just gave them the space to do these effects. And I guess since I've commented on the graphics, I like the music too. It's cool, but it's definitely not T's Music's best work. That being said, a lot of shoot-'em-ups either have really lazy boss themes or really fire ones. And this is definitely the latter and the best song in the game. I also like the remix of the title screen music on the results screen. Anyways, this game has some options including 3 basic difficulty settings, and the difference between them is about what you expect. The harder the difficulty, the more hits enemies take, the faster and more aggressive they are, and the more of them there are. There's a pretty big difference between the difficulty levels. Easy is pretty manageable if you just pay attention, but hard is brutal. But also, from this menu, you can set the amount of credits you want to use. Yeah, this game has limited continues, though honestly, like I said, this game is really easy on easy mode. Also, the game is so short that if you use up the max amount of continues, I can guarantee you're close to the end, and it won't take that much effort to beat the game. Plus, the game, in a first and a last for these soldier-style shooters, is co-op, meaning if you suck, at least you can suck with a friend, and sucking with a friend is less scary and more fun than sucking by yourself. But what I find baffling about the limited continues is that the minimum you can set them to is 4. Why? Speaking of which, you can adjust the way score gives you lives in the option menu as well. Anyways, starting the game, you and a friend, if you're playing with one, pick your character and then you're set off on your mission. You get a cutscene at the beginning of every level of this 5th member of the squad who has very fluffy hair, telling you when and where you are in time and what your mission is. By the way, there's no English patch of this game, but you don't need to be able to read or understand Japanese to be able to play this game or even really understand what's going on in the story. It's very easy to pick up on what's going on. Weird aside, I actually don't know what this character's name is. I tried to look in the manual, but I can't find it. Whatever, she sucks anyway, she doesn't fight and she has normal colored hair. Now we get into the basic gameplay of Sapphire. It's obviously a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up where button 2 shoots and button 1 fires your bomb. though I recommend against doing that too often for reasons I'll get into later. Like all of the games in this style, it has auto-fire, so you don't have to worry about injuring yourself unlike other Hudson Soft games. The big thing that sets this game apart is its weapon system, and I hate to say it, but I'm not particularly fond of how they implemented it. Which really sucks because I think the weapon system itself is great. It's basically reused from Soldier Blade, but now you have multiple different characters. It's pretty simple. There's 3 different weapons, and as soon as you pick one up, it supplies you with options, aka the shoot 'em up term for smaller ships that follow you around and shoot with you. And you power up every time you pick one up to I think 4 levels. Unless you swap weapons, then your level remains the same, with 3 different weapons for each character, each with a pickup colored red, green, or blue, similar to Soldier Blade. Yeah, RIP colorblind people. And I don't just say that as a joke, I genuinely think this is a mild accessibility issue. For a game that wants to push the limits of how many unique graphics you can include in a PC Engine game, the only difference between weapons is a palette swap, and I kinda wish they just created different icons for the different weapon pickups. But we can't do that. That would take precious graphic space away from them being able to include this teddy bear, and it's wrong to take a girl's teddy bear. Actually, while I'm on the subject, visual clarity tends to be a big issue in shoot-em-ups that keeps people away from them, but surprisingly, for a game that has a lot going on visually, it actually does a really good job at visual clarity for players, so that's not an issue. But my biggest issues with the power-up system that basically completely ruin it are that the differences between the weapons, even for a single character, are extremely negligible. And worse, the pickup icons remain on the screen bouncing around and rotate between the 3 options. Slowly. It genuinely takes like 2 seconds. This is obviously to give some added difficulty. You have to position yourself correctly to get the pickup in the first place, but also have to wait for the weapon you want to appear. But in practice, it's just annoying because of how slowly the pickup cycles, and like I said, the difference between weapons is so negligible it doesn't matter. Yeah, you're going to prefer some weapons over others, like dear God do not pick up the green weapon as the pink one, but with this system you're really not going to want to be a slave to it, and you're just going to want to pick up whatever is on screen because it's better than having less firepower. It's more annoying than Twinbee's similar cycling power-up bell mechanic because you don't interact with it yourself, you just wait. They really should have just used dedicated pickups like the previous games in this style and most shoot-em-ups. So with that being said, you'd think that a poorly implemented power-up system would ruin the entire game, but no. Like I said, the difference between weapons is so negligible and you can kind of just ignore it and upgrade whatever you end up getting that it's not really going to ruin your experience, and you'll have a much better time if you just ignore it. That's not to excuse the way it's designed, it's pretty bad and could have been better even if they did keep the cycling. Like, at the very least, they could have added some interactivity to the system like Twinbee's cycling bells I just mentioned, or at the very least made the weapons cycle at a more reasonable speed. But it is ignorable, and if you just simply play the game picking up whatever is given to you, you'll have a perfectly fine time. But there's some other weird mechanics here. So there's this charged attack. Now, if you've been paying attention, you're probably thinking, but the game has auto fire, how would you charge an attack? Well, I didn't even know it existed until I was watching the demo mode play out. It turns out that if you've picked up a weapon and don't shoot, the options around your ship will start charging up and you can press the fire button to use a charged attack. Now, obviously, if you've played any other video game with a charged attack in it, you should probably expect this to do more damage, right? It doesn't. It just gives you more points, while leaving you vulnerable as it removes the defense the options give the sides of your ship. This is good if you're playing for score. It definitely adds a whole new layer to the scoring system, and a good way to try to nab an extra life. But in casual play, it's useless. That being said, this isn't a bad mechanic. I do think it's a cool one if you're aiming for score, but most casual players actively won't have a reason to use it, and probably won't even find out it exists at all on their own. But since you watched my video, now you know. But let's talk about bombs. There are two types of shoot 'em ups. Ones where you shouldn't care about preserving your bombs, and ones where you absolutely should, and ones that don't have bombs. Okay, that's 3. You definitely have to preserve your bombs here, because bomb pickups are absurdly scarce. I mean, you can use your bombs, but once you run out, the game is basically encouraging you to off your character, because that's the only way to reset the number of bombs you have. I'd say in easy mode at least, this is a pretty easy game. It's an inherently simple one and short as well, but the way the mechanics are actually implemented is definitely the biggest challenge. My advice is to get good at boss fights and don't rely too much on bombs, and don't even bother paying attention to the power-up system, just flow with it. Or not, I mean, it's a video game, you can do what you want with it. But now we get into the actual journey the game takes you on. It starts in 2092. The bad guys start attacking as you take their forces on in the skies with an impressively detailed cyberpunk landscape beneath you, with Alec Guinness's face and fruits and fish for some reason. Yeah, I don't know. You fight this weird DNA thing, and then you fight this weird spider train thingy, but then the pilot escapes in an orb, eventually re-emerging at the end of the stage as the main boss. Warning, it's dangerous for you to come. Thank you? And it's this weird tentacle thingy. Oh, come on! You can have anime girls and you can have tentacles, but you can't have both. Anyways, after this admittedly pretty fun battle, he escapes in the orb again. This is where you get to see the other kind of cutscene. The post-stage cutscene after every stage, where your character complains about them getting away, with full voice acting, unlike the cutscenes before stages. Like I said, the game is pretty easy to understand even if you don't know any Japanese. Also, there's actually unique cutscenes for multiplayer. Every single combination of characters, including accounting for who's player 1 and who's player 2. Since I don't have any friends, I sadly didn't get to see most of these, so I can't tell you how the characters bounce off of each other, though the manual did say Jasmine has a rivalry with Sapphire. But that's some pretty neat attention to detail for a game that was rushed. Even though this is a pretty comprehensive review of the game, I can't cover all of these cutscenes, but I hope I can see all of them one day. Actually, while I'm on the topic of cutscenes, and since I know you guys love mysteries, there are no voice acting credits in this game or even anywhere online. I assume the voice actors here were professionals because the work here is actually really good, but if they went uncredited, they probably aren't. I don't know enough about Japanese voice acting to just be able to recognize who any of these voices belong to, but I'd be interested in knowing. Maybe they are credited somewhere, but I couldn't find anything. Also, I know this is random, I can't be the only person who imagined Sapphire having a British accent in a potential English version of this game. I don't know why. The next stage takes you to 1163 AD. The stage opens with you fighting a friggin' dragon. Yeah, this game is constantly running on 100%. You know, when you think about it, time travel actually makes dragons possible. You can have scientists from the future genetically modify some creatures and combine their DNA to create a dragon and then send it back in time. It'd be a good thing too. Humans gotta fight for that alpha spot. Really just shows how inconsequential everything is with time travel. I mean, there is futuristic tech here, so maybe that does explain the dragon. This stage is gorgeous. I love the effects here. In both boss fights, a golem summoned by some devil worshippers and a face are super fun, probably my favorites in the game. There's also some environmental navigation going on once you enter the castle. Next, you wind up even further back in time in 625 AD. This stage has an ancient China theme. Cool stage. Doesn't have as much interesting going on aesthetically as the others, but there's some cool stuff here. I love the main boss here though. Next stop, we're going back even further to 2982 BC. This stage has an ancient Egypt theme. It's got giant worms, flowers that you can't destroy that try to eat you. It's great. But then the game starts getting experimental with the stage design, as it starts horizontally scrolling and you're thrown into a maze you need to navigate. It's pretty easy, but yeah, kind of a sudden shift to introduce towards the end of the game. No, I'm not joking, we're almost at the end. I told you it was a short game. In fact, at this very point in the video, you would have just finished it. Yeah, that's right. I love this game so much, I'm making a video longer than the game itself. At the end of the stage, you get to a speed section where you need to navigate a quickly moving hallway filled with traps that come out of nowhere. Yeah, it's kind of overly cruel for this mostly fair game, but it's short. At the end though, you face an Icarus from Darkstalkers, and it's pretty neat. Remember, this isn't actual 3D, they just had enough space to do this thanks to the arcade card. The villain then escapes in the orb again, and we fast forward all the way to 2471 AD. The final stage. Yeah, this game's length is yet another sign of it being rushed, but it makes up for it just by being so fun that you want to replay it and get better, especially with the difficulty options. Once again though, on easy with a lot of credits, this game is fairly breezy to get through as long as you're paying basic attention. But if you thought that last stage was hard, the boss rush at the end of this stage is when the game decides to bombard you with everything it has to try to make sure you game over. It's brutal. In this game, you die in one hit, which isn't exactly how it works in other soldier-style shooters, but I don't think that makes the game hard at all, because it's really forgiving. Forgiveness goes a long way in games like this, and when most of the difficulty is fair and can be boiled down to just dodge, there's really nothing to be afraid of. Plus, you can shoot down like about half of the enemy projectiles, your options protect you from the sides, and your bombs give you invincibility. People need to get over the one-hit death thing in these games. I'm genuinely sick of hearing it used as an excuse to dismiss the genre. It's the stupidest argument against them ever. These people don't know what they're talking about. In a game that's super forgiving like this, of which there are lots of similar ones, it doesn't matter at all. Besides, the only reason you'd care about not dying is if you wanted to go for a high score, but if you're playing the game casually, dying doesn't affect things that much. Just try not to. Honestly, you can kind of turn your brain off and do the bare minimum, and if you're playing on easy, you'll be fine. The only thing unforgiving about this game are those limited continues. That being said, for casual players, if you know you have enough lives and continues on this stage, take what I said about preserving your bombs and throw that in the trash. Actually, I forgot to mention this earlier, but for some godforsaken reason, the game actually doesn't show you how many continues you have during gameplay, which is just dumb, because it shows them on menus. But if you're sure you'll be fine, just try to get as many bombs as you can, even if that means sacrificing your ship, and just try to make it to the end. I'm being pretty real when it comes to this gameplay footage. I obviously didn't one credit clear this game. And this isn't the kind of game where the casual player needs to be worrying about that kind of stuff, which I'd say is true in most shoot 'em ups. That's not what makes these games fun the first time through, that's what gives them replay value. Anyways, in this stage you're in outer space. Oh yeah, it is called Galaxy Policewoman Legend for a reason, isn't it? The end of the stage is basically one big boss rush, where it's clear the developers just threw all of the other designs they couldn't implement earlier here at the end. They're pretty awesome, and they escaped again! But not for long, as it's here we see the ending play out. This is the same for every character, so that kind of sucks, and that's definitely something I can see them changing if the game wasn't rushed. Regardless of who you play as, the ending focuses on Sapphire as she gives a narration about what happened. Apparently, the time criminal DJ isn't actually a bad guy. He was just misunderstood. As he's dying, by the way, imagine this is the last thing you see before you die. He explains to the group that he comes from a future in the 25th century where Earth was ruined by a war, so he went back in time to 2092 when it began to stop it. So, what? How does that explain going back further into the past and dragons and taking over pharaohs and faces and tentacle monsters and Yeah, this is when it goes from a mere excuse plot to actual nonsense. Couldn't he have just warned them about the war instead of attacking with spider trains and giant tentacle monsters? I mean, I know time travel is illegal, but it really looked like he was initiating all of the violence here, not the time cops. Also, is this an error or intentional or a product of limitations or what? Is this another product of the game being rushed? I don't know. It's hard to see him as a good guy, but these words, I guess, inspire the team and convince them that they should do something. I don't know. I guess fight in the war, but I feel all of this mess might have already prevented it. I think they were trying to tease a sequel, but obviously that didn't happen. And with Hudson Soft being owned by Konami, and this being at the bottom in terms of popularity of their loads of shoot-'em-up IP, yeah, that's never happening, sadly. A shame, because the ideas here could have been more fleshed out. After the ending, the credits roll and you name yourself Ass. Now, you may have listened to this review and came away with the idea that this is a rushed mess of a game with aggravating implementation of its mechanics with a stupid plot and generic characters. But the thing is, this stuff can be easily ignored. Not that that excuses it, but this is genuinely just such a charming game that I keep coming back to, and I think if you'd play it, you might come away feeling the same way as well. But how can you play the game? Well, there's the original version, which consistently goes for the highest prices imaginable. Probably wouldn't recommend that. Then in 2008, it was re-released on a PC Engine Una collection for the PSP. Not even as an extra, it's treated equally as the other games. It seems to be a pretty straightforward port. The next time it was re-released was on the PC Engine Mini, even its Western releases. But it's still the exact same game, completely in Japanese. This is your best bet if you want to play this game. Well, unless you want to play it any way you can, which I promise I didn't do, but I doubt most people want to go through the hassle of setting up a PC Engine emulator that can also play this game. But I think it's worth going through the hassle. It's a real fun time. Not the financial ruin causing hassle, but it's worth seeking out. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you how to experience it, but I really recommend it. But this goes back to what I was saying towards the beginning. For a game with so much appeal, a very forgiving, more modern experience compared to the crueler games of the PC Engine's older days, it's such a hard game to get a hold of, and I find that so fascinating. This is the most accessible, inaccessible game. But let's give it a score out of 10. Not based on objective game design or whatever, this isn't directed towards game designers or anything. But honestly, on that scale, I'd probably give it a 7. This is a rating based solely on recommendation and nothing else. And honestly, I'd give it a 9 or an 8. The only reason it isn't a 10 is because those issues I mentioned can really rear their ugly head and it can be hard to just ignore it. But this really is one of the most accessible shoot-'em-ups out there, and while some of the older soldier-style games may be better for that, this game still has quite a few unique things to offer in its own merits, like multiplayer and its overall forgiving nature. I just find it so strange that they even bothered making it accessible for that casual audience. They really wanted to capture that adventure game fandom, I guess. But just finding a way to play the game can be difficult. But I hope this inspires you to do it anyways. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you found this game interesting. Let me know if you want to see more like this. I really enjoy doing game reviews. I find them much easier to do than focusing on broader topics. Thank you to my patrons. Good night. Sleep tight.